Hey YouTube. So as you can see, I still have the Corvette behind me. I'm really enjoying the car. It's fantastic. It drives really great, but I needed a new daily driver. The biggest thing is that right now I've been commuting into Boston, driving my 2007 Toyota Tacoma. It's got 176,000, actually just crossed 179,000 miles this past weekend, and just is it's great as a truck. It's not so great for anything else. And so really started looking for whatever that next thing would be. And the idea is that I would keep the truck and use it for when we go to the dump, when we would do, kind of errands, things like that. But then my daily driver would be something that I drive every day. Other than the worst days in the winter, I won't be using the truck very much. That'll keep the miles off the truck. And so I narrowed my list down to a number of small cars and ended up deciding on something pretty fun and sporty. So the cars on my list were the Honda Fit, the Ford Focus or the Ford Fiesta, Volkswagen Golf, and then I was interested in a Mini. And I wanted something small, and honestly, like, it didn't have to be anything crazy. But part of the key for me is I wanted it to be engaging to drive. I really wanted to get that feel of a little bit of power, a little bit of handling, something that I could actually not be embarrassed to get in. And being a taller guy at 6'4", I figured that it needed to be something that I could fit comfortably, or me and a couple of friends could fit comfortably. Anyway, let's see. So Honda Fit, reliable car. They get rave reviews. Definitely if you can get the manual transmissions, you're shifting, that makes it a lot more engaging. Styling wise, it's not the best. It's functional and practical, but also it's a complete kind of boring looking car. And while I don't need it to look like a supercar or something, I definitely want my car to be engaging and fun, but also have a look that says hey, this isn't a guy in a minivan. And the Honda Fit is skirting that line. So then the next thing I was looking at was the Focus, Fiesta or the Focus, and looked at those, and there are a couple problems there. One, the Fords, as most people probably know at this point, if you're a car enthusiast, Ford is basically getting rid of all of their cars in the U.S. except the Mustang, which is great for them. It makes business sense based on their seeing crossovers sell like crazy. Mustang has a whole large following, and they can go in several directions. The GT350, GT500. But that kind of leaves everybody in the middle. Either you're getting a crossover or go look at a different brand. And one of the thoughts I had was, whatever this is, I want it to be reliable or have a warranty or have lots of parts available. And granted, Focuses, or Fiesta, they've been around for a while, so there is sort of that following. But I'm not a huge fan of the idea of buying a car that's completely out of production. I'd at least like something to have there be a version of it that still exists, just for continued development. And I know the car I'm buying, point in time, they're not making any more changes to that generation or that model. But anyway, so that was sort of my logic. Also, I had test driven a Focus ST when I was looking at getting a Focus RS before I got the Corvette. And the Focus RS, or ST rather, that I test drove really great. I loved how the gears revved out, but it was pretty small inside. At 6'4", I'm about 220 pounds. It was a tight car. My wife's fairly tall. She didn't like how cramped it felt. Your space along the sides of your legs was fairly there's a tunnel basically around you, and that meant you couldn't actually pull your legs up, right up against the seat because your knees would be hitting the dashboard. So that ended up just not really feeling great. The Fiesta I didn't get a chance to look at. I did some searching online and I couldn't find a Fiesta that was in good shape with low miles, that what I was looking for. And so, okay, there's Minis and then there's Volkswagen Golfs, and they both seat four. They both are pretty well regarded as far as a performance, fun, but economical, reasonable car. If you're a gearhead and you can only own one car, those are both very reasonable options. And so I read up on the Golf. I did a bunch of looking. I was thinking something like a GTI, front wheel drive, but a sporty car. And then I was also looking at the Minis, and pretty quickly the Mini I realized that the Mini Cooper itself is just not really enough power. It's a sprightly car and it's zippy, but I wanted something that would be fun.
How's it going, man?
Oh, hey.
Sorry, I heard someone talking down
Oh,
here,
no problem. I'm just filming a YouTube video.
Yeah,
Thank you. Hey, have a good one.
Thanks.
Sorry about that. That was the UPS guy. Sorry about that. That was the UPS guy. I got a couple packages in the mail. Anyway, back to the Mini and the Golf. And I mentioned how the regular Mini was not really what I was looking for. But pretty quickly, I was like, okay, the Mini Cooper S is kind of comparable to the Golf GTI. And so I started to look, and what it seemed like was the Golf had all the performance, all the comfort, all the nice features on the inside, but there were a couple problems with finding one in New England. One, most of them are fairly high miles. People, if it's their only car, they're driving it fairly hard. They're driving it through all 4 seasons, and I couldn't find many in a really good condition with low miles. And ideally, what I'm thinking is I wanted something, if I could, get certified pre-owned CPO. And it turned out that those didn't seem to really exist where I am, or that there weren't many of them. Plus, then when I started to look at them, the ones that I was looking at for the price range, I was looking in the like $6,000 to $8,000, maybe $10,000 price range. The prices were either not in alignment with what the value of the car was, or the cars were just they were old enough generation that I would have concern about longer term reliability for that price point. So as I'm going along, my realization was that budget was going to start having to climb if I wanted something 2 to 3, 4 years old, maybe 5 if it was in really good shape. Budget was going to have to start to climb in order to get something decent. And the idea being that if this is going to hold off on me buying a truck for a couple years, replacing the Tacoma, that this is something that, okay, maybe it's worth spending a little bit more money. I'm going to be commuting in it every day. I'm going to be driving it all the time. Something that I might enjoy a little bit more. And so I started to slide my budget up a little bit. So I started, 6, 7, 8, maybe 9 or 10 if I was really, thinking about it, to, okay, what can I get for 15? It's like, whoa, I can get actually a pretty decent, second generation Mini Cooper. For those that don't know, there's 3 different versions, 3 different generations of Mini Cooper. Since they reintroduced them here in the U.S., I think around the year 2000, somewhere around there. So I started to kind of, think, okay, maybe my budget will go up a little bit. And really, once I started to do that, I noticed that the Golfs, they were still, I'm either getting ones that are pretty beat, or they don't have CPO, or they were high mileage, or not in great condition, and there just wasn't a lot to select. A lot of people, it seems, if they go for a GTI, they're modifying it. It's got all sorts of aftermarket parts. Not really interested in getting into a mess with that. So I want something totally stock. And then, kind of the biggest thing for me was that I looked at the Golf, and after looking at some Minis up close, but having not test driven either one, the Mini seemed to have a lot more personality. The interior, I don't know if you've seen one, but the interior is really, really awesome looking. It's all sorts of big dials and gauges. It's got a lot of character. It's got interior lighting that you can change the colors. You get the whole roof as a panoramic sunroof. I mean, it's a pretty amazing thing that they fit all that in a little car. And so in my head, my interest was starting to shift towards Mini, specifically the Cooper S. I started to look, did a little more homework, and first gen Minis, second gen Minis. As someone who is not a Mini enthusiast, it was pretty daunting to want to get into them. You can get into a Gen 1 Mini in decent shape, fairly high miles, but given the years that those were around, early 2000s, you can get into a Mini for $4,000 or $5,000, $6,000. It'll look cool, it'll zip around, but if you go on some forums, you do some homework, you're going to find out that there are a couple big mechanical problems that are either waiting to happen or have been addressed. And if you don't know what the history of the car is, or you don't know if those things have been dealt with, you don't know how it's been driven, to me that was a real concern. And so I said, okay, let's look at Gen 2. And Gen 2 had a similar thing. Reliability was going to be an issue, or the cost. You drive it just fine for 5,000, 10,000 miles, 15,000, And then at some point, there's the potential to have like an engine bearing go, something major with the valve seals, and then you basically have bricked the car, and you're looking at a repair that could be up to the cost of the car, maybe even more in order to replace the engine, something like that. Advice I saw online from like Car and Driver and Road and Trek basically said, if you're gonna get a Mini, get the newest Mini you possibly can, and then buy a full warranty for it. And that can cover anything that does go wrong, and you have a new car that's less likely to have problems. So if you shift into the Gen 3 Minis, which internally, or I guess their code name is F56, if you shift into an F56 Mini, that's the code for the two-door hardtop, you end up being pretty well covered as far as reliability. Granted, they haven't been out as long. They started making them in 2014, but the vast majority of the major engine problems have gone away. You can find a CPO one pretty easily. You just go to a Mini dealership and say, hey, here are the things I want, and you end up getting a car that is not going to have a lot of reliability problems. It'll be a blast to drive. And so I ended up going for a test drive back in April, and it was funny. I test drove the car. I'll post a photo here so you can see it. Bright blue, beautiful car. I'm a fan of blue, as you can tell. My Tacoma Outback is also bright blue. Test drove the car. First of all, it was raining really, really hard. Second of all, I got out on the street and the gas light turned on, or it might have already been on, but I noticed it pretty quickly, and I told the car salesman, I was like, hey, the light's on. He's like, oh yeah, there's probably only about 8 miles of gas in here, so we got to keep it short. So I got just to drive the car for maybe 5 minutes. I mean, honestly, not even 10 minutes. It was a very short test drive, like 2 miles, 3 miles. But it was enough that I got a good sense of that I liked the fit of the car. I had room over my head. The seats were comfortable. It was spacious enough that I wasn't too concerned as far as long-term comfort. Could I carry friends? And the back seats seemed spacious. So I was actually pretty impressed with it. My whole approach with money and big financial decisions is to really think about them. Think through for days and days, weeks, usually months in my case, and really agonize over it. Do I need this? Is this something I really want? What's the value this is going to provide? I generated a spreadsheet. I went on Google, made a Google Doc, and had like the mileage to driving to work, compared that to riding the train, compared to riding the subway, compared to driving the car partway and then riding the subway, driving partway, riding the train, then riding the subway, all that stuff. And so that was back in April that I test drove. Fast forward 3 months, I've been thinking about Minis, really, pretty adamant that was the car I thought I wanted, but I wanted to be sure. And so finally got to where I was like, you know what, I think I still want this thing. Let's get a little more serious. And so I compiled a list of all the things that I was interested in as far as features. And so my features list were, I wanted a manual. Ideally, I wanted black leather interior. There were some cloth options. I didn't really care one way or the other what those were, but I wanted a black interior, which is the most common, so that wasn't a big deal. Definitely wanted the panoramic sunroof. I have had a sunroof in previous cars. My truck obviously doesn't have one. That's something that I really like. You can open it up. Oh, it's about to rain. You flip it back. You can shut it. I run it open almost all the time unless it's raining or the sun's right in my eyes. So I needed that. And then the only other big requirement was that I absolutely wanted to have the LED lights. For Gen 3 Minis, the F56, there are regular headlights, which are halogen, and then there's LED headlights. And those LED headlights, you get a couple of things. One, you get the really handy LED kind of rings around the headlights, which I just think look cool. They add to a little visibility, but mostly they look cool. So the LED lights, they're instant on and they're super, super bright. You can flip them up and down very quickly. There's no waiting for the filament to heat up or cool down depending on multi-stage halogen lights. And the throw on the light is a lot better. I do a fair amount of driving at night, and especially commuting in the fall and winter in the Northeast. It's pitch black at 3 in the afternoon, so by the time I'm going home at 6 or 7, it's a lot cold, a lot darker. So I wanted the LED headlights. So I went to the dealer and I was like, I'm interested in seeing what you guys can find. I was pretty sure that I wanted CPO also. So that was one of the things. Is it ended up that it looked like I was going to have to go through a dealer to get that. Some used car places offer like their own CPO, but I wanted CPO so I could buy a really good warranty for it. And so I went to Mini of Bedford, which is about a half hour away from me, maybe 40 minutes away, closest Mini dealer. And I said, here's what I want. What can you do for me? And they got back to me like a day later, and they're like, hey, we've got this really awesome one in Thunder Gray. We think it's just what you want. It's got the headlights, it's manual, it's got the black leather interior, panoramic sunroof. One thing it's got that you didn't mention was it's got black racing stripes on it, which I was like, okay. And then from there, I was like, how much do you want for it? And we negotiated on price. And total cost of the car was $21,500. Was what we negotiated down to. They wanted a little bit more than that, and I was able to knock a little bit off. And then on top of that, I wanted Expel for the front. So the front, kind of around the headlights, the grille, the hood, the mirrors, has Expel on it so that it won't get rock chips in the winter. The other big thing, which I mentioned a little bit, was I also wanted a warranty. I wanted to not worry about it, bumper to bumper. So I ended up getting a 5-year, 100,000 mile warranty. It's 100,000 is the termination point, not 100,000 miles from where I bought it. The car has 27,700 miles on it, and that was an additional $3,000. The Expel was $750 or $790. So all in all, my budget started at $8,000 and I ended up at like $25,000 total. So for this channel, my thought is there are all these channels out there for people who want to daydream. They want to see, what's the latest McLaren? What's the latest Lamborghini? Here's some expensive, super unattainable cars that the average person can't afford. And I realized that I have a car that the average person probably doesn't have. And I am not 100% like the average. So my thought on this channel is, compared to a lot of the other YouTube channels for car people where they're showing you super exotic things, or they're going car spotting, or, oh, hey, look, I just bought 7 new Lamborghinis and Bugattis. This is not going to be a channel like that. This is a channel about the enjoyment of cars or bikes or things that are motorized. Ideally, some interesting content with racetracks, with some of the track day stuff that I'm going to be doing, performance driving, even just kind of like day trip, up mountain roads with my friends. But also, it's a car channel focused on stuff that is like a lot more attainable, things that the average person can relate to. I don't have millions of dollars. I'm not a fancy YouTuber with all these connections. I don't have corporate sponsorship. I'm just a car guy who, I save my money and I try to do things responsibly. But at the end of the day, I'm someone who's just looking for the joy of cars. I'm not brand focused. This is the first Chevy I've ever owned. Ever bought, I guess. My first truck was a Chevy when I was learning to drive, but that was a hand-me-down from my parents. But I'm open to any brand. I'm really into this more for the enjoyment of cars or bikes. And so kind of upcoming for the channel, I'm going to be sharing videos of this car, of the Mini. I might do a review of some of the other stuff that I have. And then, kind of evolving from there, I may end up doing some mods on the Mini. There's a Dynon plug-in ECU kit that'll add 50 horsepower. So that's pretty intriguing. I'm looking to find out if you can turn it on and off so that I can get fuel economy when I'm commuting, but then have power when I'm on back roads. And then from there, there may be some more two-wheeled fun. There may be some more boat-related stuff, because that's something else I'm into. All right, so we're going to go and take a look at the car. So there's the Mini. It's gray. So the color is Thunder Gray, and it's got racing stripes on it. which are like a gloss black. And if I'm not used to walking while holding a camera and not looking at what I'm doing, but anyway, so this is the car. It is a blast. Here, let me get inside. I just washed and detailed it earlier today, so it's very clean. In fact, I'm going to take my shoes off because I haven't put the floor mats back in. But you can see, hopefully this reverses the video, because this is not the UK. No, that's Australian. Hopefully the video reverses, because on my phone it's looking like this is backwards and I'm in a British car, but I'm not. Well, I'm in a British car, but I'm not in a right-hand drive car. But you can see it's got the panoramic sunroof, which is pretty cool. I've got the infotainment stuff here. You can start the car, and it's got the pretty cool gauge setting with all the different color. You can flip into engine power and all sorts of different modes. And then it's got a fair amount of space in the back seats, so you can see I can carry 2 other people. And anyway, yeah, so this is the Mini, and I'm pretty happy with it. So I'll give some more driving impressions once I've got a little more time in it. I'm gonna get the chip in the windshield replace the windshield, and a couple other little minor tweaks from the dealership. So probably in the next week or 2, I should have an actual in-car video as I drive it, and give you guys a better idea of what it's like. All right, till then, bye. So one last thing, I wanted to give a little perspective of the 2 cars side by side, the Mini and the Corvette. So here they are. The Corvette is quite a bit lower than the Mini. I don't know if this really shows it, but anyway, just kind of neat to see both of them side by side. They definitely are some good looking cars. All right, till next time.